Hello and welcome to a fresh episode of Ask an Assistant, the podcast for executive assistants and the people that love them. I'm your host, Jess Lindgren. Let's get to work. So diving right into things this week's question comes from listener Bree. Hi, Jess. I am an executive assistant who helps manage a podcast in higher education. We receive so much unsolicited outreach from people who want to be on the show, and I feel bad for not reading the entire message, maybe doing some research to see if they'd be a good guest, or at least responding with a thoughtful thanks but no thanks kind of message, even if they're not a good fit for our show. If you get messages like this, how do you handle them? From Bree. First of all, thank you so much for your question, Bree. And second, I am so sorry to hear about your onslaught of cold pitches. It happens in every industry, to every podcast, blog, YouTube channel, newsroom, place that makes content, and truly there is nothing you can do to stop it from happening. What you can do, however, is control how or if you choose to respond. When I started working with my executive about 10 years ago, I used to do everything that you've outlined. Like I would read every single email that came through, click on the links to make sure that we, weren't overlooking someone unfairly, check out their additional media appearances, do a little digging to see if I could make my case to my executive as to why this person might be a good fit for our podcast. I also used to archive every single message that came through and even had a canned response with a link to a type form. So instead of people, outlining all of their million accolades and whatever, trying to impress their way onto being on the show, it was just a quick little type form. What's your name? What's your email address? What's your deal? Why do you want to be on the show? And all of those responses would then go into a spreadsheet, a repository on the back end of the type form. And then I'd review those every other month, maybe quarterly. And today, 20 years into my career as an executive assistant, and 10 of those years spent fielding cold pitches while supporting a successful business podcaster, I can tell you that things have changed a fair bit since 2014. First, I would say, honestly, truly, we have taken an average of about 2 cold pitches a year, maybe 1, if I'm being perfectly honest and really real. Of the literal thousands of cold pitches that we get every year, a tiny fraction of 1% of those thousands make it to my executive's desk for his consideration. Truly, I don't like to call myself a gatekeeper, but I am the person who reads all of the incoming email. We have so many relationships from him being on other podcasts, doing other media appearances, having people on our show, sending him to speaking events all over the world where he makes in-person connections, recommendations and introductions from friends, interactions on social media. We have very little need or space on the editorial calendar for cold outreach. And the Typeform spreadsheet that I talked about just a couple minutes ago, it was creating way more work for me because I would have to direct people to the Typeform, ask them sometimes several times to fill it out. And then people would reach out and say, oh, I submitted my type form 2 weeks ago. Can you tell me where I'm at? Oh, I submitted my type form 3 months ago. Can you tell me where I'm at? So people trying to teach them how to use the type form, trying to get people to use it after I taught them how to use it. The number of podcast guest booking agencies who would just email me anyway, and then I'd send them the type form again. My goodness. Tons of work for me trying to get people to use it, fielding requests about their place in line. And honestly, I feel like it was maybe creating some false hope for folks that were trying to get themselves or their clients on the show. And I would say after about 2 years, I really let that hope die and just stopped creating all the extra work and potential upset for people. Second, cold pitches are awful, and it feels like they're just getting worse. Way too many folks are just throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks, pitching themselves to literally everything and anywhere in the hopes of getting a spot. And I'm sure that does net them some media appearances, but we are very intentional about the content for the show. We're very intentional about cultivating relationships with people. and really have a strong relationship with our listening audience and membership community. So it's just those cold pitches really aren't going to get very far on our show in particular. And especially when folks are coming in with that throwing spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, when they're just really not a good fit, it's frustrating and it's a lot of work to field all of those responses. And on the flip side of that, pitching itself is a ton of work, and to do it well is a skill that I do not envy people. Or maybe I do. Maybe I do wish I had more media appearances, but it's a skill that I have yet to develop, and I definitely don't blame people for outsourcing it. There are tons of people who are very well connected, people like my friend Christina Nicholson, who have a software for a repository of podcast connections. I forget what it's called right off the top of my head, but she does have a software where you can get some help, basically leveraging those relationships and finding the right places and people to pitch for what it is that your goals are with media appearances. I don't blame people for hiring it out, but I do blame people for the icy cold, not a good fit in a million years kind of outreach. Like do a tiny bit of research and just pay attention to your pitch before you hit send on that, and make sure you're reaching out to the right folks to try to get yourself or your clients on the right shows. Third, 10 years into this, I am so tired of the word pitch. Every morning I have to wade through 100, maybe 150 cold inquiries from our inbox, most of which contain the word pitch in the subject line or the first sentence that you can read above the fold. I guess if that's a term that still applies to email, maybe I'm dating myself a little bit there. That's more of a print newspaper term, but hopefully you know what I mean. You can see in the little preview that you can see under the subject line if you're checking email on your phone or on your desktop. The worst pitches are addressed to Patrick. Nobody calls him that. Pitchers write out the entire name of the podcast, which I honestly forget because we don't use it anywhere internally. And I'm kind of surprised it's still listed as this. It's listed as the Smart Passive Income Online Business and Blogging Podcast. I had to look that up to make sure I got all the words. Listeners call it Smart Passive Income or SPI. Pat calls it Smart Passive Income or SPI. Again, I'm kind of surprised it's still called that, but that definitely alerts you to the fact that they're not really interested in your podcast in particular, that they're just kind of taking everything that they can copy and paste from any publicly available source, copy pasting quickly, not paying attention, so that the email is addressed to another person or an entirely other podcast. That's always fun too. Lastly, there are so many people out there that are teaching folks the quote unquote best way to pitch a podcast, which usually involves a script, which again is totally fine. I think it's great to have kind of some bare bones of these are the points that you want to hit. Make sure before you send it that you've talked about everything that you want to talk about. But when people send me, again, just that wall of text of the laundry list of other podcasts you've been on, the 20 topics you want to talk about, your book that's releasing tomorrow, we record several months in advance and just can't support every single book release that comes across our desk. When the message is addressed to and tailored to an entirely different podcast and a different niche, like it just doesn't set a good first impression. And plus, the script often comes across like a robot wrote it. And in today's world of everything being infiltrated by AI, human connection is so important. So, rounding my thoughts out, the short answer to Bree's question is that I handle cold outreach by deleting anything that's too robotic, addressed to someone else, or requesting a backlink. That was a big thing for a while back, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Maybe it's still a big thing today. I'm not sure, but the number of backlink requests we get is many. I also, if it does seem like it was written by an actual human, we'll just send a quick, not seeking guests, thanks, and archive anything that I actually skimmed. A couple times a year, I do bring the guests that I found the most interesting to Pat's attention, and I've even gotten a couple onto the show. Like I would say, if we've been working together 10 years and he reviews like to a month, maybe, on cold outreach, I've probably gotten like 5 people from total cold outreach to being on the show. And that's from reading so very many cold pitches. So that's it. It took a really long time for me to not feel bad about deleting cold outreach, but the sheer volume that we receive honestly is exhausting. The number of super spammy ones that I take the time to reply to create 10 new spider legs of emails, and it's honestly just best to delete them and move on with my day. So that's it in a nutshell. Cold outreach. Do with it what you will. Don't feel bad about it. Come up with a quick, cute little canned response if you want to, but honestly, just move on with your day. And to anybody out there cold pitching, focus on creating real relationships with people. I really feel like that has served all of our guests on the podcast so well over the years, and it will serve you as well. You know, get out there into the world. Go to a networking event. Don't spend another 6 hours tomorrow crafting cold email pitches sitting in your office by yourself. Like, go somewhere. Go to a coffee meeting. Go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting. Get out there and shake some hands, kiss some babies. And that's all for this week. Thank you so much to Bree for your question. And thank you to all of you out there listening. Hi, Grandma Lucy. And on that note, I would love to hear from any and or all of you at askanassistant.com. Please submit your questions for consideration. Something I haven't said since my 2021 episodes, but I do firmly, down in the very deep down part of my heart, believe that the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to create a safe space for executive assistants and the people that love us to ask questions and share my experience. I hope to hear from you soon. Take care.